Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Feltman. I'm the Executive Vice President of One Israel Fund. One Israel Fund is the premier organization in North America that takes care of humanitarian aid and projects for the communities in Judea and Samaria, as well as helping those in need along the Gazan border. Tonight, we are featuring a wonderful panel discussion about a number of issues dealing with Israel and the pro-Israel lobby in advance of the upcoming AIPAC conference. The panel features Dr. Harold Rode, Sarah Stern from E.M.E.T. Harold Rode is a scholar on Islamic studies and one of the foremost experts on issues dealing with the Muslims in the Western world. Sarah Stern is the head of E.M.E.T. E.M.E.T is a public advocacy organization on Capitol Hill. And Eve Harrow, who in addition to working for me as our Director of Tourism, is a renowned spokesperson and runs her own podcast and has the distinction on the panel tonight of being the one person who lives in Efrat in Judea in Israel.
And the audience is a group of invitees from where?
So the audience is from all over the country, and I think we have a couple of international people here this evening. They were invited through social media, emails. They're supporters of One Israel Fund, from E.M.E.T, people at AIPAC who are just curious to learn more.
I mean, AIPAC attendees at the convention?
There are some people who are here over Shabbat as part of the AIPAC Shabbaton, and also CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, had a Shabbaton as well.
Are they employees of AIPAC?
No. They are people who are here to attend the conferences and heard about it word of mouth and thought it would be an interesting thing to do on a Saturday night. My name is Scott Feltman. I'm from Far Rockaway, New York. I have the distinct pleasure and honor to be the Executive Vice President of One Israel Fund, which is co-sponsoring tonight's event. I just want to first of all thank everyone for coming. It was actually inspirational to hear where everybody's from. It's a unique experience when you come here during all these different conferences because you're able to get passionate, unapologetic supporters of Israel together from a diverse swath of land and from different continents, and it's just really, it's inspirational. This event was really put together very, very quickly. I'll just give you a little snippet into how this works. 5 years ago, One Israel Fund sponsored the first Celebrate Judea and Samaria event at the John Hancock Hotel in conjunction with the AIPAC convention. And the reasons we did it then pretty much exist today. We felt that it was very important that people hear a view that you don't often get. If you do go to the AIPAC convention, again, I'm not saying anything negative about AIPAC, that's not the purpose of this evening. But to hear from people who spend their entire time and lives working on behalf of the areas in Judea and Samaria and the pro-Israel lobby, we felt that it was important to have that opportunity for people to hear from people, especially someone like, for example, an Eve Harrow or Mark Provisor or Ben Packer, who are living in these areas, that it's extraordinarily important, especially this year when we're getting together before the convention even begins, to hear from some of the experts on our panel this evening and really ask some pointed questions and get information that we might not have been exposed to in the past, and have that opportunity to develop some of our views and our vision for the future, and to understand exactly what's going on at this unbelievable time that we're living in. One Israel Fund was founded 25 years ago, specifically to support the communities which at that time were in Judea, Samaria, and at the time in Gaza. And over 25 years, we have contributed tens of millions of dollars to building these communities, from highly sophisticated security equipment, which Mark Provisor in the back of the room oversees. Countless lives have been saved because of it. We also do emergency medical equipment. We're building a medical center. We do playgrounds and synagogues and mikvot and schools and everything and anything in between that you can imagine as a charitable endeavor to help these communities stay safe and to continue to grow. And we've been doing it for 25 years. I'll give you one plug. If you're in New York on April 26th, our dinner, which was supposed to have been on February 9th, was actually postponed to April 26th. You're all welcome to come. I can't tell you that that event is going to be free like tonight. One thing that is free tonight, in addition to listening to our panel, there is an amazing bottle of wine from Shiloh, an award-winning bottle of wine from Shiloh. All you have to do is drop a business card into the bucket or fill out a card with your information. Somebody will win it tonight. With that, I'm going to basically ask each of our panelists to give a little bit of an introduction as to who they are and why we've compiled them here tonight. First, all the way to my far right is Eve Harrow. She is our director of tourism in the Israel Fund, but so much more. She has a podcast. She's a spokesperson on behalf of the communities. And for those of you who ever have an opportunity to go to Israel, you should try to seek her out and go around with her. It's an experience unlike any other. Sarah Stern is the head, as you've heard already, of E.M.E.T. E.M.E.T is, and I'm going to read it just from your website because I know you're not going to talk about yourself like I can talk about you. Annually holding 250 face-to-face meetings on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Senate and House offices. They hold 20 seminars. They reach 25,000 people weekly through their newsletter and Facebook and Twitter feeds. And since 2005 have written over 11,000 articles, all basically pushing the pro-Israel agenda unabashedly and nonpartisan, by the way. And on that, we also have, and this is an honor for me because I just got the opportunity to meet him, Dr. Harold Rode. And I can tell you, I don't have a Wikipedia page because I just haven't accomplished enough in my life. His Wikipedia page is long. But let's suffice to say, one of the foremost experts today on the Islamic culture and on the issues facing the Western world and how it relates to Islam and the Islamic nations. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Harold Rode to say a few words about who he is, why he's here, and what we hope to accomplish this evening.
How long? 5, okay.
You said 8, I say 5.
Whatever.
If I say 5, you'll speak 8.
I'm 70 years old. I have spent my life since the age of 14 trying to find a way to make peace between the Muslim world and the Jews. And I lived a Muslim life. I was putting off getting a PhD in Islamic studies. I lived in Iran, went to university there. In Turkey, my PhD is Ottoman history of what is Israel. And spent a lot of time in the Arab world, was in the Iraq War. At that time I worked for the Pentagon, was there for about 28 years as an advisor on Islamic culture. And all I wanted to do was find a way that you could have peace between the Muslim and the non-Muslim world. I speak the languages, I once could daven better as a Muslim, both as Sunni and then later as a Shiite, than I could as a Jew. I don't come from a Jewish background. I am halachically Jewish from birth. My wife was sitting here, that's for you, whatever. No, but seriously, I've done my damnedest, and I would like, when we have our 8 minutes, or is it 8 minutes now? Oh, okay. Look, bottom line. You cannot have peace, as we understand it, like between Canada and the United States, between Muslims and non-Muslims. Forget Jews, anybody. Anytime a territory is conquered by Muslims, it is Muslim forever. How many of you know Hebrew here? Okay, Hebrew is based on roots. The root for opening is pei, taf, hayt, to open. In Arabic and Hebrew basically dialects of the same language. I know they don't sound it, but they are. Arabic also has that root. It is f, there's no p in Arabic, t and hay. Fataht al-bab, if you've studied Talmud, then you know bab al-masiyah, it's like door, gate. Bab is, fatahtu, I opened the door. Ani. Now, it has another meaning in Arabic which is essential to understand. in Arabic. You open a land for Islam. Once a land is conquered by Muslims, it remains Muslim forever. So you can go into Islam, but there's no way of going out of it. Spain was conquered in 712. They lost it in 1492. From a Muslim point of view, whom does Spain belong to? The Muslims, forever. There's nowhere. We have Caris here with, who is the head of the Israel-China Signal organization. A wonderful, wonderful lady, and as smart as could be. And there's a province in China called Xinjiang, which has all these Uyghur Muslims. It was conquered in the 11th century by Muslims. Whom does this province belong to? Muslims forever. And a little place that really is the reason we are here tonight. In 636 to 637 CE, Eretz Yisrael was conquered by the Muslims. Whom does it belong to? Now, from a Muslim point of view, I'm not interested, of course, that's what I think. But of course it belongs to the Jews. Hashem gave it to the Jews. And the Tanakh is the deen. Why am I saying all of this? Eve lives in Efrat. Our apartment in Jerusalem is in no man's land, meaning before 67 it didn't belong to Israel or Jordan at the time. And I think you've probably heard of a place called Tel Aviv. Now, Tel Aviv was in pre-67 Israel. Efrat is in post-67 Israel, where Eve lives. There is, from a Muslim point of view, no difference between Tel Aviv and Efrat. It's all the same. Or where Mark Provisorci lives in Shiloh, in the back, it's the northern part of it's in Samaria, or what we used to call, or some people used to call, the West Bank. I would love things to be different. There is no such thing in Islam, a permanent peace between the Muslims and the non-Muslims, as I said before. Result is, all these marvelous agreements, Oslo and everything else that was done before, what happened? They were all based on both sides agreeing, which means the Palestinians had a veto. This agreement we have today, the deal of the century, is magnificent. Israel gets the places which are Jewish already, and the Palestinians are going to have to agree to do certain things before they can get whatever they get. They have to agree to disarm. And what are the chances of that? Number two, Gaza has to be disarmed. Not possible. So it's a situation where Israel gets parts of our ancient homeland, which is basically where Jews live. And now it's up to the Palestinians. If they want this, they're going to have to do certain things, which they can't. Let me tell you why. In Islam, you and I, what's your name, sir? Okay, Gene, you and I have been enemies. We don't like each other. But you and I need each other now. So we sit down, you give a little, you compromise. A concept that does not exist in Arabic. And I compromise on things. We shake hands, we put our arms around each other, we're now friends, and we march on together. That's what shalom means. Shin lamed mem, that root is completeness. Bygones are bygones. Concept does not exist in Islam. There's no such thing as compromise, because your personal honor is what you lose if you give in. It's like a woman supposedly, let's say, being a half virgin. How do you do that? It's not possible. Now, and with this, I guess I'll end, because we'll do 8 minutes and any type of questions afterwards. And my job is only to look at this from a Muslim point of view. That's it. The reason why Yasser Arafat, you remember this character. Yasser Arafat is sitting at Camp David with Ehud Barak. And I'm no fan of Ehud Barak's, but I'm very much a fan of what I'm about to tell you. Ehud Barak offered Arafat everything, and what was then the West Bank, it was called, with the exception of what was underneath the Temple Mount. Why? It was our Jewish temple. You get the stuff on top. What did Arafat do? He jumped up, and Mr. Clinton describes it in something he's written, and he's shaking. The first thing he says is, there was no Jewish temple. No Muslim sources say it was the Temple of Solomon galore, but we understand it differently. Solomon was, for us, obviously, the son of King David, but the first man, Adam, was a Muslim, long before Islam. And so was King David, and so was Suleiman, which is the Muslim form of Shlomo for Solomon. But he jumped up and said there never was a Jewish temple. But then he said what really mattered to him. I will not have tea with Sadat. What does that mean? Sadat signed an agreement with Israel. I didn't call it a peace agreement. He signed a piece of paper. You can't give up Muslim territory. He came back to Egypt and said, I did this for the good of Egypt because all our money is going down a rat hole. We need to build up our country. And then he said something that no one wanted to hear at the end. What will be in the future will be in the future. Sounds obtuse. No, the Muslims didn't miss what it means. I had to do it now. This is called a temporary agreement. You hear all over Israeli news, Hudna or Sulh. It's a temporary agreement until you can you get enough power that you can push things on. It's based on something that Muhammad, their prophet, signed a 10-year agreement at a place called Judea. He was losing a 10-year agreement, and then with that 10-year agreement, for let's say a truce, what happens? 2 years later, he's strong enough. Bye-bye, Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That's the best you can have, that Israel can have, that anybody can have with the Muslim world. It's a temporary agreement until they can get on. Their goal is to make the whole world Muslim, including the United States of America. And that's the way it is. I hate every word I am saying to you guys tonight. I hate it, but it is the reality. So what is important, and I will leave it right here, is that Israel must remain strong and be under no illusions of the reality of what it's like. I can tell you that most Israelis agree with me, the ones who have grown up in Muslim societies, which are my age and older. They know it. It's the way it is. And so, actually, Hashem, God gave Israel wonderful, wonderful neighbors, because they can't say yes. There's no way to agree to a Jewish state on Muslim territory. And why is that important? As long as that you know that your people on the other side won't make peace with you, you gotta be strong. You're inventive. You have unbelievable military things, cyber and all that. You know what happens to Jews if someone begs and says, hey, let's have peace. Oh, what do you want? Please come and take it. As long as they are the way they are. If Yasser Arafat couldn't make peace because he was afraid having peace with Sadat means he's dead. He would die, be assassinated like Anwar Sadat was. And you talk about this guy, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen. He's a zero. He can't make peace. They'll kill him too. That's why that's why he says what he does. And that's why this administration has been brilliant in putting forth an agreement. Look, guys, you never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's it. Here's your chance to get something. You don't want it, don't take it. So what's going to happen is that, let's say Israel gets, that's God willing, everything will be mapped out. Israel will get what it wants. And we'll start from that line, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I hope you had a wonderful evening. We've covered, I think, everything now. Actually, Sarah, would you like to introduce a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Do you want me to go as far as Harold has gone in who I agree with? 1,000% usually on everything.
Let's tell a little bit about the organization,
okay.
And then we'll move.
Okay. What I do. Okay, my name is Sarah Stern. I am the founder and president of E.M.E.T, the Endowment for Middle East Truth. E.M.E.T obviously means truth in Hebrew. And the reason my background was as a school psychologist, and I volunteered for this pro-Israel PAC during which shows how old I am, during the 80s and the early 90s. And I got to know a lot of people from the Embassy of Israel during that time. And on September 14th, 1993, the day after the Oslo Accords were signed, I got a phone call from 3 wonderful individuals from Yitzhak Shamir's government, Yoram Ettinger, Yossi Ben-Aron, and Yigal Carmon. And they said to me, Sarah, we have a sinking suspicion in the pit of our stomachs that Arafat isn't going to live up to 1 iota of the accords he's just signed. We're back in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. We need somebody who's in Washington to pass around the videotape. So he gave me these old-fashioned cassettes of what it was that Arafat was saying to his own people in his own language, which Yigal Carmon translated. And I broke my teeth in politics by passing these around the Hill, and it was very hard for me because, after all, I was a school psychologist. I liked to be a peacemaker, and all of a sudden I was the skunk in the garden party. I had to tell the truth. People didn't want to hear it, but I believe in reality, and I believe in reality therapy as a psychologist, and I felt it was criminal that people, smart people, Jewish people, were willing to willfully blind themselves to the incitement to hate and to kill that the Palestinian population was being inebriated with. It was in the oxygen that they were breathing. This has been going on for over a generation now. It is in the textbooks, it's in the sports stadiums where they name people after martyrs and what they're so-called martyrs, killers, suicide bombers. It is absolutely impossible for a young person to grow up in that environment without hating our people. So that is essentially how I got started. I didn't have a chance to drink the Kool-Aid like most of our co-religionists about Oslo. And from there, I was the National Policy Coordinator of the Zionist Organization of America, and then I was the Director of Governmental Affairs for the American Jewish Congress, and I was invited to a certain think tank in Washington when they had 4 Tanzim terrorists. And this think tank gets its money from good Jewish charitable dollars, and I couldn't stand it, and my father, should rest in peace, was a chazan at Cantor who made $10,000 a year till the year he died. And my mother was very smart when he died. She sold our house in White Plains, New York, got Sylvia Porter's money book for women, read it, and invested in the stock market. And by the time she died 15 years later, she had $100,000 for each of her 4 children. And I came back to my office at the American Jewish Congress, which was really much too liberal for me. And I called my husband, my wonderful husband, Buddy, who was sitting in the audience there. And I said, you know that money Mom left us? I need it to start another think tank which will actually tell the truth about Israel. So I started E.M.E.T. And it's been 15 years, and we're not belly up yet. We're still going strong, and we're able to tell the truth on Capitol Hill about what Israel's up against.
Now for the Israeli.
So I call myself kind of the accidental activist because I never expected to be doing anything that I'm doing today. I have a master's degree in psychology. We moved to Israel in 1988 because I simply don't breathe well when I'm not in Israel, and that still remains the explanation for the country that I love so much. My husband's a physician, and I was busy raising our kids, which turned out to be 7 in the end. Got involved in local politics. We moved to E.M.E.T in Judea because we both felt that if we feel that Jews should be able to live in Judea, then instead of going to Tel Aviv, we needed to actually walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So we've lived there ever since. I was on the local council in E.M.E.T for 10 years, got a little bit involved in national politics, enough to realize that it wasn't my world, that ultimately I also believe in the truth and I hate ignorance. And most people have their opinions based on what they maybe read in the New York Times or somebody tweeted to them. And so eventually I got more involved in speaking to groups that came, taking journalists around. I moved to Gush Katif, to Gaza, in the summer of 2005 for the last few months. So I was there to see my friends' farms destroyed. I also had one of the most interesting conversations of my life in one of the hot houses with the rotting cucumbers, which I've told to some people here. I said to, there was one of the Arab workers who was there, and I said to him, you must be so happy in a couple of days you're getting all of this. And he said to me, "Ha-bracha higema Yehudim, ha-bracha yazovim ha-Yehudim." The blessings here came with the Jews, and it'll leave with the Jews. And I said to him one of the most obnoxious things I've ever said to another human being. I said, "How do you know that? You're a Muslim." And he taught me such a big lesson that day. He said, "What does it matter that I'm a Muslim and you're a Jew, and I call him Allah and you call him Elohim?" He said, "Some of us see God in the world, and it's clear to me that this place is going to go to hell, and the bad guys are going to take over." In the end, he was more right than he thought. I found out that he had been killed years later because he was a collaborator, because he had worked with Jews, what we would consider moderates and people who were looking to coexist. So in his world, he was considered a collaborator, and he was later on killed. So I got involved that way. I became a tour guide 10 years ago, which some of you know because you've spent days with me. I look for places and I look for people around Israel that you wouldn't ordinarily go to, because it's really important to meet the people and to understand the land. There is nothing that replaces going into these communities, standing on the top of Mount Gerizim, going to Shiloh, going around Gush Etzion, drinking the wine, having a great time, but understanding when you look around that most of these areas are empty, that there's room for everybody if this was really about peace and coexistence. So this is the first time that I've actually spoken publicly about the Trump plan, because I've been there since 1988. I don't like calling them intifadas because that's not our word, and I try not to use terminology that other people use. Like, I will never say give back because that infers that it belongs to someone else. I will never say West Bank because that's some amorphous term that, just like Hadrian tried to do 1800 years ago, erases the Jewish tie to the land. Terminology is incredibly, incredibly important. And so with what I do when I guide, sometimes I guide apolitically. No one knows where I live. I have bigger fish to fry, which is just getting them to care about Israel. But really the most important thing, and nothing replaces actually seeing the places, seeing these communities, seeing the open spaces around them, which would mean that if everything was fine, there is no reason that we can't all live together. And since I live there, I also do practice coexistence. When I go grocery shopping, I'm at Gush Etzion. I'm at the Gush Etzion Junction with all the Arabs from the communities around there.
Slow down just a bit.
Oh, okay. 8 minutes is not a lot for me. I'm trying so hard. How do I fit 3,500 years into 8 minutes? So that is something that you need to come and you need to see for yourselves. Unfortunately, because of terror, people are afraid to come. And so the enemy wins before he even does anything. Oh, I'm not going there. It's over the green line. It's scary. The roads are scary. Yes, there are certain dangers, but if you've ever been to Israel and just driven anywhere, so you know that I'm still more afraid of that. There is a psychological element here that we need to overcome. I listen to Harold, who has become like a big brother and really an uncle to my kids in many ways. He's a Ben Bayit. He's Shabbat in my house. I can tell you what he eats and what he doesn't eat, but maybe later. And I have so much respect for him and for Sarah as well, of course, and for what they do. But I also realize is that we are lacking self-respect in many ways. Years ago, when I was in a debate with someone from the far left and a Palestinian Arab and myself, and everyone had left the room except for myself and the Arab, he said to me, "Listen, I want you to know that I hate all Jews," which is not, such a nice thing to say, but I'd kind of picked that up during the course of the conversation anyway. So I said, "Okay, thanks." And he said, "No, I want you to hear something that's super important." He said, "I hate you, but I respect you." He said, "The left-wing person that just left the room," he said, "not only do I hate him, but I despise him, and I don't trust him, because if he can betray his own people, meaning the Jews, he will definitely betray mine." Wow, did that open my eyes to what was being thought. And he said, "You're a proud Jew, so while I might disagree with you and you're my enemy and you have what I want, I respect you." And I realized that over the course of my life and the things that I do, Elise Felger is here, who I've seen. There's an organization called Momentum, which brings women to Israel to kind of reconnect them with the Jewish aspect of their life. And it's an incredibly important organization. And I realized through the work with the women as well that we don't have enough respect. A lot of us are just trying to be somebody else most of our lives on an individual basis. And I think sometimes we're doing that as the Jewish people also. So it's very likely that the Arabs will reject this plan. I don't doubt one word that Harold says, for their own reasons. And by the way, they're not monolithic. There are many people within them who would be very happy to leave that kind of ideology and actually realize the tremendous advantage that they have of living with Israelis. They may not like us, but there's a lot of advantages to living with Jews in the Middle East. See what's going on all around us. So just for practical purposes, and some of them are secular, they might want to do that. They're not going to be able to do that because of the cultural reasons. But I want to focus in on ourselves. It's not just enough for us to say, well, we're going to wait till they reject it. We have to stand up proudly and say, these places are ours. So the problem that I have with the current plan is that map, because that map leaves certain communities very, very isolated, and no community in Judea and Samaria is more important than another. So I live in an area, it's a big town, it's except for Yossi Beilein's short-lived Geneva plan, Efrat has always been in the consensus, and even people who say, they believe in a two-state solution, Gush Etzion, the greater area, is always going to be annexed to Israel. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me because there are other places that will be out, but at least my house is safe. It's not about my house. It's about something much bigger than that. And yes, there's the Bible, and there's the ideology, and there's the greater land of Israel, but who am I to know what God wants from us? I'm very small with that. I don't know if land is more important than lives. I don't know exactly how we're going to get through all this. I don't know what's going on. I just know that I have to do my bit. But part of my bit means saying that the Jewish people belong here. And we have made it better for everybody, like the lesson that I learned in Gaza, that I never expected to learn the lesson from. And we have our rights to stay there. So what we need first to do is to put, in my mind, Israeli sovereignty on all the communities, without exception. All right, doesn't take away anything from anybody else. And yes, it could be that the Arabs will get upset and that they'll be violent again. But does that mean that we don't do what we need to do, that we're constantly living under a threat of intimidation? And I'm saying this as somebody who lives there, as somebody who's been to way too many funerals over the years of relatives and of friends because of that violence. But if we are constantly going to be acting and being afraid because we're afraid of other people coming out against us, we're never going to get anywhere. All right, that's an abusive relationship, and at some point you have to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. There's a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with God and the Bible and ideology for wanting to have Israeli sovereignty on these areas. Practical things. Our roads are not in great shape. We need better infrastructure. We need policemen. If there's an accident now on a road in Judea and Samaria, you're going to get an army jeep pulling up. Those are soldiers. They're not supposed to be dealing with traffic accidents. They're supposed to be primed if there's a war and dealing with those kinds of enemies. It's not good for our soldiers to be in these kinds of situations. We need a civilian apparatus like you would have anywhere else. There's environmental issues that have to be dealt with. For their own pride, there are times where, let's say there's sewage coming out of Ramallah, and Israel will build them a plant to clean the sewage, and they won't take it because of their pride, because then it looks like Israel controls them. We just want to make sure that the you-know-what doesn't get into the valleys and destroy the environment for everybody, because everyone will get sick. And so there's a lot of very practical things that have to be done that we've been waiting for over 50 years. I don't live in a country. My children are conscripted, and I pay taxes, and I do everything that an Israeli does. But in the bottom line, I don't live in Israel. And decisions have to be made. And yes, our enemies to some degree have made it easier for us for being so ridiculously obstinate and not seeing that there's a bigger picture here, and it could be an unbelievable country for all of us. But I can't go by that. I have to go by what we need to do, and to hold our heads up high and to say, we're starting from here. This is ours. You're welcome to join us. Your life will be so much better if you do. But we're not waiting for you to figure it out. The Muslim world needs a major reformation. I can't affect it. I can't even get my kids when they come home to clean up their rooms. All right? There's a limit of what we can do, but we have to do what we can do. And we have to do it with our heads held high, because we're an amazing people. And Israel is, I think, the biggest miracle and sense of human endeavor that the world has possibly ever seen, but definitely in our generation. And we have to make sure that that pride comes through. Not being mean to anybody else, but just saying, this is ours. We've worked hard for it. Nobody handed it to us. And we're keeping it. And we have a lot to offer. And to stop being afraid. Just stop being afraid of everything.
Since everyone really brought up a little bit about the Trump plan, the deal of the century, peace through prosperity, I thought we would get a little bit more into it by analyzing some of the pros and cons as to what you think are the positive aspects of this plan, some of the negative aspects, and where you think this is going to be headed, depending upon both the election in Israel on Monday and obviously the election coming up here. So, Harold, you're certainly...
Well, let me just talk about it from a Muslim point of view. Anybody who gives up any land and who agrees to any part of this plan is a traitor. The Arabic word murtad means an apostate. Apostasy in Islam is punished by death. When he mentioned we need a thought revolution in Islam, we need a reform. But the Muslims have no incentive whatsoever to do this. Anybody who opens up his mouth, and you and I know Muslims who would like to be able to open their mouths and say, gotta start somewhere. We gotta find another way of dealing with this situation. You open your mouth, that's why Arafat refused to do it. That's why Abu Mazen is refusing to do it. And that's why anybody, remember, we Jews, if God forbid someone leaves Judaism or says he leaves Judaism, he converts to something else, Shumad is a horrible thing. We're very sad, we're very upset. How many of us would take out a gun or a knife and kill them? We don't do that. That's not up. But in Islam, if you do that, there's no trial needed. The Arabic word is dhubah, which in Hebrew, again, same language, the in Arabic is a the in Hebrew, dhubah, zabah, mizbah, to slaughter, an altar, mizbah in Hebrew. It's the way it is. Do I like it? I hate what I'm telling you, but I lived it. I used to daven, I said I ate in mosques, I ate in their restaurants, I argued with them about Quran galore. Different world, never the twain are going to meet.
All right, I have, this is really unusual for me because for once in my life I'm centered, really, which is great. But I have to tell you that from years and years of following these things very closely, there are some things about the Trump vision for peace and prosperity, the plan, that I find really wonderful and refreshing. And that is going back to July 24th, 2000, when I was in the audience at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and Eliakim Rubinstein, the Attorney General of the State of Israel, who was with the negotiating team between Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak, and Bill Clinton, came to us. And he said that there were Israelis who were part of the team who are in their limousines back to Ronald Reagan Airport crying because they just felt if they just offered Arafat an offer that was so good he couldn't refuse it, he wouldn't. And what they offered was 95% of Judea and Samaria, a division of Jerusalem, a right of return of thousands of refugees, and he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he walked away from the negotiating table. And the response came 2 months later in the form of an intifada. And then in 2008, Ehud Olmert topped this. He gave virtually 100%, or 99% with land swaps in the Negev, a division of Jerusalem. I think the Holy Basin, which we would, the Kotel, what they call the Haram al-Sharif, was going to really be in their hands. imagine going back after the miracle of 67 and a right of return of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees, which would be a demographic nightmare. So they kept on upping the ante. The baseline kept on getting higher and higher and higher. The response was always in the form of violence. So, for once, we are not rewarding violence. We are not rewarding bad behavior. They're giving the Palestinians 70% of Judea and Samaria, but the Jordan Valley and the 30%, which is where most of the settlement blocks are, would remain in Jewish hands. And the Jordan Valley, which is a topographical and geographic natural boundary, which is really important, even in the age of missiles, in case there's a war by foot, would remain in Jewish hands. And Israel has always needed defensible borders to defend itself by itself. So what I like about the plan is that it changed the paradigm. And that, to me, is very important, and that we did not reward bad behavior. So that's the positive thing about the plan. Now, of course, you know, anybody listening to my wonderful, brilliant, and articulate friend, Arrow, we know this is all Israel, you know, and we know what you're saying really resonates with every, and it should resonate with every single Jew who has a sense of Jewish consciousness and Jewish identity. And the reality is also that there's a tremendous amount of wisdom of what Harold says. And the wisdom is they don't know how to say yes. So in the meantime, Israel ends up looking like a dozen roses, and they look like a bunch of stinkweeds. And that is not a bad thing. You know, they're saying no again. They could have had $50 billion. They could have had industrial zones. I was really, really honored and privileged to be invited into the East Room of the White House when the plan was unveiled. And right sitting in front of me were the ambassadors of Bahrain and of Oman and the United Arab Emirates. And that's incredible. That is really a miracle. I think maybe we have Iran to thank for that, because in the old Arab adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But there is something really miraculous going on there.
So I will admit that when I listened to Trump, present the plan, I cried. I was sitting in my kitchen watching on our computer, and I wept to hear possibly definitely the leader of the free world and one of the most powerful people in the world talk about Jewish historical rights in the land of Israel. Not just security, and not just a lot of the words that have been bandied about in different administrations, but talking about our roots. And I thought that was an incredible moment. It really was. And as I said before, the map bothers me, but the idea behind it, and I believe the spirit of this administration in trying to finally rectify many of the moral wrongs that have been done over the last few decades is tremendous. And this is where I am 2 days before elections, and I'm going home tomorrow to vote, going to put the onus on my government. All right, we are a very, very democratic country. As the joke is going, we have more elections in 1 year than our entire region has in 100. All right, we're like uber democratic right now. Hopefully this will be the last one. But we have what to do within our own country. We need to be able to elect a government that will make the right decisions. Everybody is very upset, or at least in my world, a lot of people are upset about the fact that the Trump plan, the deal of the century, talks about a Palestinian state. But so did the Prime Minister of Israel in a major speech that he has not recanted, that he gave in Bar Ilan. So this is not like a new idea that just got floated, all right? So I think that Israelis have taken a long time to wake up. There's also internal things that are happening in Israel that have absolutely nothing to do with the Israeli-Arab conflict, different religious issues and economic issues and all the things that a normal developing country is going to have, all those different kinds of tensions. But I would really hope that the vast majority of my countrymen get out there on Monday and vote, and that we finally get a government together where we can, because we've been in abeyance for the last year. We're not passing budgets. There's just a lot of things that are not happening, including the ability to be able to respond to this plan with one voice. And so I am praying that Monday goes well, and that the decisions that the Israeli public will say, because, we're grown-ups, which means that we're responsible for our own lives. Israel's a grown-up country. In some ways, sometimes I look at my neighbors and I think it's much easier because they're like in perpetual adolescence. They have their totalitarian leader, their absolute monarch, or their dictator, or whatever it is, just telling them what to do. And so they may not like it, but they don't have to think too much about it. So we in Israel have to think all the time. It is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. We never stop thinking. And that's maybe the big energy output that we put. But I would hope that on Monday the country makes the right decisions for the right reasons, and that we're able to then come with heads held high as a country, and and be able to sit with this plan, to sit with this map, and finally do some of the things that we've needed to do for a long time. And for a variety of reasons, again, people come from different motivations, and that's fine. And economic motivation is also a fine one. All right, you can't live off of ideology. You also have to be able to have a country that is able to, provide for its own people and have that kind of security, which miraculously we have. Water security, food security, an outstanding army, and tremendous things that when you really sit with that for a second, it could take your breath away at how quickly and how amazingly we have done this with all the noise. So that's where I'm coming from, as an Israeli who's getting on an El Al plane tomorrow in order to do what, when I get into the voting booth, I will do every single time, is wear waterproof mascara for the privilege of being a Jew who is able to, in some little way, affect the future of my people and of my family and my greater family, is something that I will absolutely, to my last breath, never take for granted. And none of us should. Just the fact that we can have this discussion tonight is awesome. So, with that, I'll finish up. And I just want to thank you all, by the way, for coming. Yes. You had choices tonight, so I appreciate it.
Speaking of everybody in the room, it's nice to hear presentations, but unless it actually effectuates action, it doesn't make much of a difference. We have a room here full of potential activists. Quite a number of you are probably here in conjunction with either AIPAC or CPAC or whatnot. You're going to be going on to Capitol Hill. You're going to be meeting with a lot of people who are making these decisions. And certainly when you go back into your communities as well. So I think we should spend a couple of moments, if there's a message that should be given to everybody in the room here as to what role they can play over the next 48 to 72 hours, and then also beyond, and how you can actually impact the discussion and make a difference. We're going to have questions from the floor in a moment. Yeah.
Before they give their,
yeah.
I just want to say, to give a little
Microphone.
give a little perspective to what we want, what will be helpful to us. This morning I sat in a security briefing at AIPAC, and it was full of European, some Asian, some Latin American diplomats. And I think there were 2 Israelis. I was one of them in the room. And there was a presentation by the military spokesperson, Boaz Ganor, who does counterterror, and a woman who spoke about elections. And it's great to be in this room. We all kind of agree with each other, and we all have generally the same feeling about all of this. That room was a totally different room. And that's the room we all have to go back to. So when you're giving your comments about what we need, please keep in mind that we have to go back to, all of this is wonderful and invigorating, and I agree with a lot, I think that we have to be realistic and whatever, but I was saying earlier to someone, if only we had annexed Israel back then, annexed all the land, then he said, we'd have peace now. We would. So it's definitely up to us, but right now, what we have to know is what to do when we are taking these ideas out to that other room.
How was it different, by the way? Just say the room was different. How? What way?
I think we all know how it was different.
How was the audience in that room different?
They did not, when we talk about terror, when we talk about our challenges in Lebanon and Syria, when we talk about the peace plan, they say, oh, this is such a terrible plan. Oh, the Israelis are so awful. Look, they're getting all of this stuff from America. Trump is a horrible person. He's a horrible president. How dare he think of offering this kind of thing to the two sides. He's no longer legitimate. You know, all the things that I think many of us hear all the time.
When people say AIPAC is a far-right or right-wing organization,
Again, this is not an opportunity to say anything positive or negative about any organization. That's not the purpose of this evening. But we do know that at any of these conferences, you're going to have people who are going to agree with you and people who don't agree with you. And to some extent, the people who don't agree with us are probably in the majority in a lot of these rooms. So with that, I'll ask each of our panelists to address this.
I come at this from a different way. My heart is of course, I'm in the right place for me here tonight. But the answer is, look, the moment we get people on the Muslim side that are willing to make peace, bygones and bygones, and say it's over, to live in peace with Israel, then we have something to talk about. Until that time, we don't. Frankly, most of the American Congress and Senate, and this is something Sarah will know a billion times better than I, agree with what I just said. So that's what I would do. But then again, you know, I live in a different world.
Okay, just, I wish it were true that most of the Congress is it's no longer true. It used to be. Things have changed. People are coming out of universities now, and they are very, very pro-Palestinian. And you know which side of the aisle I'm talking about. I don't have to say it, but to me, it's very upsetting. I would love to believe what they say in that other organization that should remain unmentionable, that's having their convention this week, the policy conference, that, you know, on both sides of the aisle, it's exactly the same. It's just not the case. But I think in terms of the question you asked, the task is for all of us to just invoke a little empathy for what our people go through. That's what I try to do every single day when I'm in Congress, especially when I'm speaking to liberal Democrats. I talk about what happened in 2005 at the Gaza withdrawal. I was also there. I wasn't like Eve, who's really the heroine of the panel today. She really is. She's our only quote-unquote settler. She's the person who's gone through the Intifada. She's the person who's had to bury friends and family. I mean, it's very easy for us on this side of the ocean. Eve's lived it. But in 2005, I was in Israel, and I saw how internally divisive this whole Gaza withdrawal was. I spoke to soldiers who felt horrible when they had to take people out of their homes. They said, this isn't what I signed up for. I spoke to soldiers who felt that their commanders were making them feel like robots as they, you know, and they were crying along with the people. And I heard on the radio rabbis that said, let's save the synagogues, because after all, we all pray to the same God. You know, let them turn them into mosques. I heard about the billionaires that were buying the greenhouses so that this nascent Palestinian state could have some sort of economic infrastructure. And then I saw that as soon as that blue and white flag was lowered, those greenhouses and those synagogues were all destroyed in this huge atmosphere of chaos and antipathy for any remnant of a Jewish presence. And that is the kind of thing that I say to my left-wing friends and family, relatives that are far too many, and to members of Congress, just for them to realize how far Israel is willing to go and has been willing to go. I have to tell you, my friends on the left had said to me in the beginning of Oslo, Sarah, what are you so worried about? It's only Gaza and Jericho first. If it doesn't work, we could always retrieve it. Yeah. You see how easy that is when they booby trap all the houses. There are Jewish lives, and I said there's going to be Jewish lives at stake. But they said, no, we won all of this in 6 days. It'll be nothing. And before the Gaza withdrawal, my friends were telling me, Sarah, this will finally prove to the world how far we're willing to go for peace. They're going to remember this. Yeah. You think they remember that? So when it comes to Jewish life, we can't take any chances. Every single Jewish life is precious. Of course, all lives are precious, but charity begins at home, and we have to, with what our people have gone through for this tiny little Jewish state, we have to remember our people's lives first.
Okay, I'm not letting you guys off the hook. Every single one of you has to decide what you're doing. All right, it's not enough to care. It's very important to care. That's the beginning. But you have to do something practical. All right, if you're just sitting on a fence and reading the newspapers and changing your opinion or not changing your opinion, that's fine. But you have to do something now. We all have to become activists. Believe me, if I could be an activist, if I can have a podcast, I was the person who was the shyest person in the room. And if I can have a podcast and interview people and I can do what I'm doing right now, you can also step out of your comfort zone. So if you're rich, that's the easiest thing possible. Just write a check to an organization that you believe in what they're doing. I'm not kidding. And have them do some things. But I can tell you without giving names that there's somebody in this room right now who had the privilege of guiding their family. And one of their family members who was on that trip is coming back to me in a few months' time with 2 Christians who are his partners in his business because they have never been to Israel. And he decided, and he is bringing them, I'm the guide, and he's bringing them for a couple of weeks, and we're going to cover the country, we're going to see the Christian sites, we're going to see the Jewish sites, and he said, this has to happen. They hear me talk about Israel all the time, and they have to get to know it as well. So there are things that you can do to move this forward. If you're not doing anything, you're allowing the enemy to win, because our enemies do not rest for a second, not 1 second. And while we're all talking and doing things, they're making their plans, and they're not nice plans. So if you believe that Israel needs to stay strong, that Judea and Samaria is a part of that, let me just take a look at the map. Israel's 9 miles wide without the hills of Samaria. If you believe that that's important for Israel's future, if you are a true liberal, I am so offended by the fact that progressives and liberals are seen as people on the left. Okay, I believe that everybody should be able to do what they want as long as they're not hurting anybody else. Freedom of religion, freedom from religion, whatever it is. I see the Arabs who live in Israel and how free they are, and they tell me how much they would prefer to be in Israel than anywhere else for so many different reasons, and not just if they're gay, even though that's a big one. All right, that they just feel like they can be themselves where they can't in their own world. It's really heartbreaking. All right, so if this is important to you, if a strong Israel is important to you, because for a lot of Americans, not only is it not important anymore, it's a burden. And unfortunately, maybe even the majority of American Jews now feel that way, which is one of the hardest things that I have had to realize, is that some of my co-religionists are not necessarily friends of Israel. And I also see Israel, though, as an example for America. It's a country that's based on family and on faith. And I'm using the word faith here intentionally and not religion. Okay, it's a very cohesive place. With all the fractiousness and all the arguing that you're hearing, it's a very special place. And it's a place that Americans can learn from. All right, there's different ways to interpret the light into the nations, and this can be one of them also. So even for America's sake, Israel needs to remain strong. And you have to figure out, each one of you, and I'm not going to pass the mic around and ask, how you're going to make that happen. All right, this is just homework from tonight. I know it wasn't on the flyer. All right, that this isn't just about coming here, maybe disagreeing with us, but at least you came, which is absolutely fabulous, because most people don't like hearing anything but what's in their own echo chamber. And that in itself is incredibly important. Talk to people, get other people involved, and get them to come and get them to really understand the issue. All right, and if they're confused, even better. If somebody understands what's happening, there's a problem. All right, it's very multifaceted. And to speak to experts. I mean, just hearing from Carice today and about this meeting that she was in. And we're not blind to that. We know what's going on in the rooms of the powerful people. All right, so we have to work twice as hard. We have to work twice as hard to make sure that Israel continues to exist.
I just
That's
wanted
the bottom
to
line.
say, there are a couple of real heroes in this room that have, yes. First of all, Tommy Waller and Carlton Taylor, they have a wonderful organization called Hayovel. They are Christian Zionists. Raise your hands and stand up. They have, navigated the roads.
Tommy, stand up.
Stand up. They spend most of their life working the land of Israel, the vineyards, for free, just trying to help sustain the land. And they don't have to do this. These are Christians. They are wonderful, wonderful human beings. And we're so blessed to have them. And there's
Jake Bennett just snuck into the room in the back.
Fleischer, they're amazing. Yishai is a phenomenal rabbi, and Jake Bennett has been working really, really hard on our side of the issue for years and years.
He just passed legislation in Arizona.
Yeah.
Gotta go through the House. We still have to go through the Senate and the governor.
That's someone to learn from about how you can make a difference in your state. Go talk to Jake.
Yeah. And Yishai Fleischer is an inspiration to everybody that knows him. And there are just a lot of phenomenal people that we are blessed to have amongst us today. And I just want to, give a shout out and an applause to these wonderful human beings.
There's also Ben Packer sitting in the back corner there.
Right.
Everything that
yes,
he does.
Right. Yeah.
Totally.
Is Dahlia still here? There was a woman here this evening. I apologize for not having announced it earlier. She's actually running for Congress against Ilhan Omer. She was here this evening.
Minnesota.
She is. Her name is Dahlia, it's Dahlia Al-Akidi. She's actually from Israel, and if you wanted, she's Muslim.
I think she's a Rocky.
She's a Rocky.
Yes.
Oh, so
Yeah. I met her the other day. She's amazing.
She's amazing.
So I misunderstood when I met her last night. Anyway, if you want some information about her and how you can help her, please let me know. We unfortunately have come really to the end of the program, and I had hoped to really go around and have people ask questions, but unfortunately the JCC has very specific rules on the room. I want to leave you with one story. We were just talking about some of the heroes in the room. One of my personal heroes, I actually have the pleasure of working day in and day out with every day for the past 11 years. Some of you may know Mark Provisor. Mark told me a story years ago, and I think this is a message that we can end on. Mark used to be the Rav Shatz, the head of security for the Shiloh block from the years of 1996 to 2006. It's an entire story on how that happened and where he was at the time. Mark is an amazing artist by trade, and he basically gave in his paintbrush for 10 years to deal with the Intifada years that we were just talking about, and probably responded to over 100 terror attacks, and many times returned parents to their children and children to their parents. And today he basically oversees all of our security and emergency medical work. But this is an interesting story, and this is a message I think we can all take from. Mark told me that he was driving on a hot summer day into the fields of one of the Arab clans in his area. And he drove straight in because Mark doesn't actually follow the roads. Mark takes his Jeep and goes off-road many times, as many of you might know if you've ever been with him. It was a hot, hot day, and they were working in the land, and he opened up his Jeep, and he started handing out cold bottles of water to all of the Arabs who were working there. And the head of the clan came over and asked him, why are you doing this? Like, what's up? So Mark said, what do you mean? If I would come into your home on a hot day, you would offer me a drink. You're in my home. I am the Bala Bayit. I am the head of the house. You're in my land, in my home, and I will treat you the same way I would expect to be treated if I were a guest in yours. And it's that message. It's that message of how we have to view what Eretz Israel is to us. It is our home. We are the Bala Bayit. And we're okay with other people living there and building their lives, and that's fine. But we have to always keep in mind who we are in the story. And for 3,500 years, it's been ours, but for over 2,000, we weren't there in numbers. And it's been a gift that's been given back to us in our generation. Why? I can't answer you, but it's our generation that has been given back this gift. And we have to understand what it means to have that gift and what it means to be the Balabayit and to stand up and say, this is our home. And we are here and we're not leaving here. And I think that's the main thing that we've been trying to beat around tonight and get across, that when you do go to Capitol Hill and you go back to your communities and you meet with your congressmen and your senators and anybody else that's in a position of leadership, or even your friends and family who may not agree with that, it's important to always stand strong. I learned one other thing from Mark, that after 67, not that Mark fought in 67, he's not that old, but Jews in America walked around with their chests pumping out after 67, how proud they were about the Israel and the IDF, and today they slump. They're embarrassed by it. They think that we are the colonial oppressors because that's what they've been taught in their universities and many of their synagogues and their homes. And we have to change that narrative one person at a time. So every time we meet with someone and you're at these conferences and you have that opportunity, it's not easy being in that room with people who don't think like us. But we also have to remember in our hearts that we are the Balabayit. And we're there and we are in the right. Not just on the right, but in the right. And when we go and we meet with these people, just keep that in mind whenever you go through this weekend, the next few weeks, and for your lives. This is a gift that was given to us, and it's only going to be ours if we act like the Balabayit. So thank you so very much for coming. Again, there is a bottle of wine which we're going to raffle off at 10:15. If you haven't put a business card in yet, you can. If you don't have a business card, you can fill one out. There are still refreshments in both this room and the room across the hall. Please feel free to stay and mingle. And thank you very, very much for coming. And thank you to our panelists, Dr. Harold Rode, Sarah Stern, and Eve Harrow. Good night.